Hey, yes, Marcus Youssef, New World Theater. I'm the artistic director. We do 3 to 5 shows a year. They're almost all original and almost all predicated on a single idea, that what happens when we expose ourselves and our audiences to perspectives and experiences that are fundamentally different than our own. What happens then? That idea gets called diversity, but I think we can also use the word translation because in my experience, diversity depends on it. Sadly, this idea, so central to the identity of our country, is in many contexts, like this slide, reduced to a kind of generic cliche. That's the first 3 images you get if you Google diversity. Or in some ways erased altogether. My personal experience in the late 90s, I, like many others, was hired by the CBC as part of a push to make the corporation more culturally diverse. What always struck me was how the many people hired at that time were almost exactly like me. Visible minorities, middle class, mostly born and raised in Canada, and who spoke very good English. Brown folks who, in almost all other ways, acted and sounded like everybody else there. Real translation, I would argue, like real diversity, is difficult. Like as a Middle Eastern Canadian, in the wake of 9/11, when we were told we would never laugh again. Do you remember that? It's why there's a black slide there, or was. I wanted to show a picture of the towers, but then I got scared. And that's when I co-wrote this show with my friends Kamyar and Guillermo, Ali and the Axes of Evil. It's a satire about 2 Middle Eastern refugees from a country called Agrabah, which the Disney PhDs will know is the country from Disney's Aladdin. When doing interviews for the show, we tell journalists it was on the Uzbeki-Lebanese border. It's not a real border. There's a map of Agrabah and the flag. They added the stars after the US invaded. That's us with George Bush in that famous picture of us when we were on the campaign. In the show, at one point they introduced their corporate sponsor, who is Osama bin Laden. And because the Alis knew the audience wouldn't like that too much, they suggest that maybe Al-Qaeda should consider, like so many Western corporations, rebranding. Like maybe New Al-Qaeda, or AQ2, or hey, why not ISIS? In 2006, we co-produced this play. My name is Rachel Corey. As we did, a member of Parliament in the House of Commons rose and demanded to know why the Department of Canadian Heritage was funding anti-Semitic art. Though the show is about the Israeli occupation of Gaza, it is in no way anti-Semitic, and we also received no funding from the Department of Canadian Heritage. In 2012, we co-produced a reading of this play, Homegrown, about a terror suspect held in Toronto. We produced it not because it's a great play, it's actually not, but because after premiering it in Toronto to a media firestorm and comments from the Prime Minister's office, the Summer Works Festival had its Canadian Heritage funding inexplicably cancelled. This incident recently was interesting to me. Justice Minister Peter MacKay said, that during this real foiled plot to murder scores of people in downtown Halifax a few months ago, it wasn't and couldn't be terrorism because it wasn't culturally specific, which is a specific act of translation. Because when Peter MacKay says cultural, we all know which culture he's talking about. When people picture the region of the world my family is from, what I think they mostly see in their heads are images of violence, backwardness, and oppression. They don't necessarily see the weird pictures of Cairo rooftops you saw a second ago, or this revolutionary graffiti in a place called the Wall of Martyrs in Cairo. That's a portrait of a child who was killed during one of the military's crackdowns. Or what it meant for me to meet my family. In a moment, that's my cousin, Marcus, who I met for the first time when I went to Egypt for the first time in 2012, in the middle of a revolution when I was 42 years old. I think when people here think about places like Egypt or Iraq, they see a picture that is no more a truthful reflection of that place than the mythology that Canada is nothing but a peace-loving, progressive democracy ruled not by multinational energy corporations, but by the will of an engaged citizenry, where, like science itself, political dissent isn't just tolerated, it's celebrated as the cornerstone of our national identity, which has nothing to do at all with the most profound act of creative translation I have ever participated in. Just wait. That's my cousin. What I love about this picture, it's my friend Niall McNeil, who's a person with Down syndrome. And what I love about this picture is that if you had to figure out from looking at this picture which one of us has Down syndrome and you didn't already know, it could kind of go either way, right? The next image you'll see is from the first show we wrote together, called Peter Panties, which played at the Push Festival in 2011. Niall is an actor. He grew up in the theater, and his whole life he had wanted to make his own adaptation of Peter Pan. That's an image from it. But Niall can't physically write. So with big Olympics money support, when they were shoving it off the back of the truck, we met every week for 2 years. We talked, we acted out scenes, I asked him questions, he improvised songs, and I recorded every minute we spent together. I took those recordings and transcribed them and then organized them into a script, which we gave to a group of some of Vancouver's finest creator performers. And in doing so, we invented a way for Niall to write. Oh, it gets quite risque in bits. He gets married at the end, you'll see in a second. And obsessed as I am with the place of the Middle East in North American consciousness, it took working with an artist for whom translation is not just an idea, but a fundamental and conflicted part of every human relationship he has, to remind me how important and necessary translation and real diversity is, and how art making is a natural place for that to occur. Thanks.